Hello everyone, I am Carlo Bustos, Educational Programs Leader at Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Put the A Back into FP&A, Leveraging Best Practices. Many surveys show that finance teams are focusing on the biggest opportunities for creating strategic value, and in particular, on how they can improve their analytical contributions to drive better decisions. Unfortunately, they only show what teams are focusing on rather than how to make those opportunities come to life. Today's educational event will review best practices for optimizing financial planning and analysis and demonstrate how you can put the analysis back into FP&A. And now just a few housekeeping notes before we do move on. First, I'd like to welcome you back to Proformative. Just a brief overview on Proformative for those of you who may be new to our community. We are the largest growing online community of finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. We are an ad-free, noise-free community where we encourage and expect peer-to-peer collaboration. Check it out at proformative.com. Now just a few event notes before we do get started. Just like to share with you the links to today's presentation as well as the recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event, but the presentation is currently posted on proformative.com/resources if you'd like to download and follow along. For those of you who would like CPE credits, you will need to answer all 4 polling questions during the event today and should have pre-registered for it. For any questions around CPE, please contact Chris Brower at proformative.com. We truly encourage everyone to utilize the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel today. We have a great subject matter expert who will be sharing a lot of great best practices around the analysis portion of FP&A. So we ultimately would love to take as many questions as we can throughout the webinar as well as during the Q&A session. For whatever reason we do not get to all of them, we will work with the speaker to make sure we follow up directly with you post the webinar. And lastly, you'll be asked to take a quick survey today regarding the webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding this event as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer to you as the attendee. And now just a few of the learning objectives that we're looking to partake onto you today. After participating in today's event, you will learn how to reduce the budgeting time by about 90% while eliminating errors, understanding how to deliver timely and accurate reforecasts and what-if scenarios, become aware on how to drive better business decisions through improved reporting and analysis, learn how to improve company-wide participation and alignment, as well as discover how to increase the strategic value of finance. Okay, let's get started. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Bill Aiken. Bill is the Principal and CEO of Abacist Group. Bill has an extensive experience in helping companies of all sizes achieve their growth goals. He is the founder and CEO of Abacist Group, a boutique consulting firm focused on corporate performance management. Bill gained significant business operations experience working for 10 years at PepsiCo and Frito-Lay with their finance, sales, and marketing organizations. When Bill left PepsiCo to launch Abacist Group, he was the finance director for PepsiCo's $7 billion strategy grocery channel. Prior to PepsiCo, Bill worked for a small B2B company in Dallas, as well as a major consulting firm, Anderson Consulting, in Washington, D.C. Bill earned his bachelor's degree in economics from Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia, and holds an MBA with concentration in finance from the University of Texas at Austin. Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlo, and thanks to everybody who's joining today. It's a good day to be in Dallas, where we are based. We actually have all 5 living U.S. presidents in town today for the opening of the Bush Library, so excited about that here in Dallas today. Let's dive into this and learn how to put the A back into financial planning and analysis. I want to talk about a spectrum of the role of finance and talk a little bit about how we can move you along this path from stage 1 to stage 4. So if we look off to the left here and ask where you are on the spectrum, the goal is to move from left to right. first step, we have transaction management. That's the most basic, most fundamental portion of finance, where it's really accountants who are looking at the numbers, a lot of detail, maybe pulling together an annual budget, but not a whole lot of planning and analysis above and beyond that. We can move up the food chain here to step number 2 and have finance become more involved in the overall process, where they can help with reporting and minimizing risk. You begin to get into controlling the business, maybe doing some variance analysis to understand why actual results are different than the budget. And really today, we'll spend most of our time talking through the movement for stage 3 and stage 4 here, with stage 3 being developing a financial planning and analysis capability where finance can really be a key business partner to help drive and make decisions. I like to think of finance as being in a unique position. They speak the language of business, which is finance and accounting, and so it can really be the glue to help provide sound financial analysis for that decision-making process. And then taking it all the way to Bright, finance can really lead to integrated functional excellence to become the glue for enterprise-wide collaboration as trade-offs need to be made across the organization, across functions, understanding what the economic impact of those decisions will be, and doing predictive what-if analysis and planning. So the goal is obviously to move from stage 1 to stage 4 here. Okay, so I'm going to share with you today 5 best practices to help put the A back into financial planning analysis, some of which are focused on analysis, others are focused on freeing up finance time in order to have more time to actually do the analysis. Best practice number 1 is to use rolling forecasts. And here we want to do a quick polling question, so we'll have 4 of these polling questions, as Carlo alluded to earlier, throughout the webinar, and you'll need to complete all 4 of these for CPE credit. So the first question here is, how often are you reforecasting? And so you want to pick one of these, monthly or more often, quarterly, biannually, or annually. And I'll give you a minute to answer that question.
Hey, Bill, we got a few folks still answering the question here, so we'll give them another few seconds here. Just a reminder, as Bill had mentioned, if you are attending today's webinar for CPE credit, you must take all 4 of our polling questions to receive full credit. We will be closing this up here in another second and sharing the results so that you all can see what everyone is thinking. Let's stop it here. And Bill, I'll go ahead and just share these results so everyone can see them on the screen.
Okay, great. So we've got more folks doing it quarterly than anything else, and then the second most doing it monthly or more often. That's good. Biannually 9% and annually 10%. So this group we have here on the phone today, incidentally, is reforecasting more frequently than average. The typical response rate would be around 20% are doing monthly or more often forecasts, about a third doing quarterly forecasts, and then 20% biannually, around 30% doing it annually. So that's great news that you're already incorporating some of the best practices, which is to forecast often. And a key piece of moving to a rolling forecast, what we really want to do is move beyond just the annual budget. So some independent research by the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable found that 64% of annual targets are obsolete in 4 to 6 months. Not surprising, you know, business conditions change. So really the notion behind developing a rolling forecast is that you don't want to be tied back to that annual budget. That can be a very helpful measuring stick to measure performance and assess if you're hitting your overall targets and plans, but you want to continuously be reforecasting the business to ensure that your plans for decision making are never out of date. And part of what you want to do there is frequently re-import actual data, and that's going to improve your ability to do trending forecast. And a really good rolling forecast process, you're going to import not only financial data from the general ledger, but you're also going to import operational data from other systems that hold key drivers to help you make better decisions. And really, at the end of the day, there's no one right answer for how frequently you should do this. It's really as frequently as your decision-making process warrants and as resources allow. So realizing that a typical organization out there is not going to be able to reforecast on a weekly basis by any means, but I have seen some companies be very successful in the sales forecasting arena in particular, where they will refresh their forecast on a weekly basis even, so more frequently than even a monthly basis. And doing this helps keep everybody on the same sheet of music to have your actuals continuously coming into the planning process, seeing where you stand day in, day out, and being able to assess and forecast different scenarios for different decisions. I had a client in the healthcare space that had been purely budgeting on an annual basis, so just having that annual yardstick, and we helped move them to a rolling forecast where they could assess new patients coming into the system to each of their hospital facilities throughout the country. And from that, they were able to make better decisions around staffing, so seeing what the patient loads were coming in from their operational data systems, trending that out, seasonalizing it, and seeing how they ought to change their overall staffing mix for providers, primarily nurses, enabled them to really make better decisions around productivity of their human resource labor out there. So that's just one example of many on why it's beneficial to move to rolling forecasts. Okay, best practice number 2 is automate your planning KPIs, dashboards, and scorecards. And time for our second polling question here. So Carlo, if you'll go ahead and pull that up, I would appreciate it. So I'll just read that off. How long after you close do you publish your KPIs and dashboards? So 1 to 2 days, 2 to 5 days, 5 to 10 days, more than 10 days, or maybe you're not producing them at all. So go ahead and take a moment and answer that question. And we'll give everybody a second here to go ahead and input that and get their CPE credit.
And we still have a couple more folks answering here, Bill, so we'll give them about another 10 seconds or so to get their final decisions made here, and we'll go ahead and post and share. All right, we're going to go ahead and close this out, and I will be sharing the results here, and everyone should be seeing this on their screen here momentarily.
Okay, so most are more than anything else, 5 to 10 days, followed by 2 to 5 days, and a lot 1 to 2 days. So again, this crew on the phone today, I think a little bit faster than what I would typically see out there in the marketplace. Typically I'll see it more in the 5 to 10 day range and more in the greater than 10-day range here. So kudos to you guys. So obviously, the faster you're able to close and pull in results into your planning process, your planning tools, the more relevant the information is going to be to enable you to make better decisions. And with that, the automation aspect is really key. A lot of the finance organizations out there, the finance professionals, whether it be a financial analyst or manager, they spend a lot of time collecting data, getting data into spreadsheets, adding it up, aggregating it, and run out of time at the end of the day to actually analyze it. So the best practice here is really to begin to free up time on the finance staff through automating the close process, automating pulling in actuals into the decision-making tool. And you may want to think about automating in real time. More likely, it's going to be near-time integration of data from your various data sources, whether that be your ERP system, a CRM system, human resources system. Pull that information in automatically on demand or on a scheduled basis into your planning tool, whatever that planning tool happens to be. And then with that, if you get the actual data in there automatically, you want to be able to see that in a visual fashion, develop charts and graphs. It's much easier to digest the information if it's in a visual format as opposed to simply tabular metrics. So definitely think about how you can pull that data in and visualize the metrics for instant understanding and gaining insight. I'll give you an example. I was working with a manufacturing client, and they had a very, very robust Excel model that was incidentally was not automated. It had been developed by a top-tier consulting firm, Boston Consulting Group, so a lot of great thought went into the planning model within Excel. They were importing data from their ERP system into the planning and forecasting tool, but just based on the number of calculations, doing a lot of allocations to various products and costing, anytime senior management would want to take a look at a new scenario, it would take literally 6 to 8 hours of processing time on a dedicated laptop that they had, just standalone, that they could run the numbers on. So not a very automated process, and we were able to move them onto a dedicated automated corporate performance management application. And it still takes a little bit of time to aggregate all the numbers as they're running through scenarios, but we've cut it down to a matter of minutes from many, many hours. And as a result of that, now they can look at a lot more what-if scenarios, analyze the impact of different drivers that are coming into their process, different inflation rates, different staffing assumptions, different pricing scenarios, and in the end be able to make a lot better decisions because of the automation of the process and the tool and moving off Excel. So that's a key piece in freeing up finance time and enabling more rapid decision making is the automation of it. Best practice number 3 is create driver-based plans that you can drill into the detail and flex and change the numbers, somewhat related to my previous example where they were wanting to do this. So I'll give you a couple examples here of ways to analyze the numbers in looking at them. So first example is analyzing volume or revenue growth drivers. So in this grid here, what we have going down the left-hand side, this could be different ways of slicing the business up. It could be by division, by product, by service, understanding the different building block components. Sometimes we would call that dimensionality, used to go plan and drive the business. So looking at each one of those discretely, and then having various activities that go drive revenue growth related to that. So it could be gross pricing in terms of your list price management, net pricing after discounts that you grant customers. In this case, putting products on display, so going back to your marketing class of being able to have placement and promotion of the products, advertising, distribution. So understanding what each of those building blocks contributes to the overall revenue growth. In this case, we had 5.9 points of revenue growth overall for the company in this time period. And each one of these cells on the sheet would represent a building block to get to that 5.9%. So product number 1, the increase in gross prices led to a 1.1% increase of the 5.9%. So you want to be able to break it down into the components to be able to understand what are the key activity drivers that lead to growth and be able to analyze those drivers over time. So revenue can be fairly simple or relatively simple to do. Understanding the whole P&L statement is more complex, but you can still use the same notion of dimensionality to be able to begin to break it down into its components, into its pieces, to analyze the data and understand what's going on a basis where you can go drive decisions and make results happen. So I had an example very similar to this that I was working with a company on, and what the numbers on the screen represent, each of the blocks that are colored, so 3.5% for the total company, that's the overall profit growth for that component of the company. So total company growing at 3.5%. And then you can see down below how much growth, profit growth, each of the divisions were contributing. 2.4% from Division 1, 1% from Division 2, and so on. And then underneath that, take Division 1 as an example, you can see how they got to that contribution of 2.4 points of growth to the total company. Their gross revenue was growing 3.8 points, their net revenue growing 4.6 points, and then their profit within that division growing 5.2 points. So in other words, the 5.2 points was contributing 2.4 points of growth to the total company. So I break it out this way to show you just what can happen if you don't take a look at it in this manner. The company that I was working with was so focused on kind of the annual budget and just the percent variance to that budget that they began to focus too much of their time and energy on Division 5 over here to the right. That division was incidentally really missing their profit goal. So their profit was declining very, very rapidly versus a year ago. You can see here that down tremendously versus a year ago. Their gross revenue was growing, and all of senior management was focused on that one operating division because of the percent to budget numbers that they were looking at. When we broke it out in this fashion and begin to peel back the layers of the onion and then get into it and understand what the various growth drivers were, we realized that, hey, you know what? Even though that division had a very poor percent to plan, its materiality to the overall company was not that great in terms of the overall profit impact. So the overall company, if this division had been growing, it would have only contributed a 1/10 of a point to the overall growth. And so we said, you know what? Stop worrying so much about Division 5, and let's shift time and effort over to Division 3, which even though they're not missing their profit growth by quite as much, they are down versus a year ago, so having a negative impact overall. If we can turn that part of the business around, it's going to lead to much better results in terms of the overall company growth and have the ability to go manage through that in the form of pricing. So they were experiencing cost inflation. We were able to realize as we begin to peel back the layers of the onion and look at the product level detail and all the costs within that. Cost inflation was impacting their profit growth by 0.3 of a point. They were spending back a lot of their gross price increase, their list price increase in the form of discounts to their customers. So everything they had anticipated getting through gross pricing, they ended up giving back to their customers. So didn't realize that growth there. And on top of that, the overall profitability impact from their gross revenue decline was pulling down the overall company by 0.2 of a point. So looking at it this way, looking at the underlying drivers can help make better decisions and help you prioritize where you should be spending your time and energy as a finance organization and helping the rest of the functions decide what to do. And be able to go analyze the impact of what I would call gap closure initiatives. So in this scenario, the way I like to think about it is what I call P&L slices, where if we have our baseline forecast and maybe we talk about various key performance indicators or key metrics across that base scenario. So in this case, we had market share, dollar market share. This company's sitting at 20%. They've got a gap to plan of 2.1 points. So they had budgeted or planned to be at 22% market share. Their gross revenue was, say, $1 million, and that was worse than budget, worse than planned by $40,000. And you can kind of go on down the line and see the various metrics here. So being able to have that baseline understanding what the forecast is, and then side by side, go take a look at different gap closure initiatives that can go help close those gaps. And it's important to look at these across the entire P&L, maybe including market share information if you can do that sort of thing. So when you do that, you can balance across the P&L the different trade-off decisions. So gap closure initiative number one, it's kind of a no-brainer, delivers additional market share, delivers additional revenue, delivers additional profit. That's easy. Let's go do that. Check. Gap closure initiative number two, that's a little bit harder pill to swallow, but maybe based on where the company is heading strategically, they may decide that they want to do it. So they may give up some of their market share, give up some of their revenue by cutting some costs and driving profitability. So cutting cost of goods of maybe some of the more expensive products or services that they offer as part of their portfolio and having a mix shift over to more profitable items and giving up some revenue but generating additional gross profit. So strategically, you could take a look at this and say, okay, I'm willing to make that sacrifice on the top line to go get profit growth. Conversely, there may be another company or another environment that would say, you know what, our overarching goal is not so much profit growth, but we want to have market share growth. And so again, looking at it this way, we can see, okay, we're willing to go make an investment to go drive the top line, even though it's not going to result in anything from a gross profit perspective. And of course, in doing that, that's going to hurt your overall profit margins, but you're gaining market share and perhaps addressing a strategic need that's out there. So I found that this is a very helpful way to look at it when you start to get into scenarios, and really ought to take a look not just at one KPI like revenue, but try to be holistic about it and look at the entire P&L, perhaps the other financial statements as well. Okay, so in terms of driver-based planning that you can drill and flex, you really want to focus on what drives your business and automate the rest. So freeing up finance time, the only way you're going to do that is to not try to predict via manual effort every last detail in the business. So focus on those key drivers. If it's pricing, if it's staffing, whatever it is, you want to focus on those pieces and try to automate the rest. Second, having the ability to drill down to transaction level detail, which can be facilitated through an application, or drill across dimensions like products, like services, like geographies, to get to root causes is very important. So you've got to be able to analyze it at that level and do that sort of drill down, drill across in order to understand root causals that can help improve your forecasting and predictive power and therefore decision making in the future. And really freeing yourself up via a driver-based approach where you focus on the drivers will help you conduct on-the-spot what-if analysis, so you can more rapidly toggle those drivers and see what the corresponding output is if you do the analytics correctly. Makes it much easier to do that sort of thing. Okay, so moving on to best practice number 4, the finance organization ought to try to drive enterprise-wide collaboration through their planning process. And here I'm going to turn it over to Carlo again to tee up yet another polling question. So the question here, a little bit simpler, just 2 potential answers. Are planning activities in your organization distributed across business units, departments, and functions, or is all the planning handled centrally by the FP&A organizations, a centralized FP&A organization? And we'll give you a minute to answer that question here. I'm sure there are a few folks that are still keying in their response, probably a few folks eating lunch at the moment, I suspect, and probably trying to balance a sandwich and do their mouse keystroke at the same time here. So
yeah, we'll give another second here too, Bill. I'll be closing this up here now and sharing the results here on screen, so you guys should be seeing this momentarily. Okay, excellent. So pretty close to an even split here. We got 57% where each team is responsible for their own planning, and then 43% where FP&A handles all the planning centrally. So that, again, good. You guys are above average as an overall group. You know, the typical metric would be something more on the order of a quarter are doing it embedded within each team out there, and then closer to 75% in terms of having the finance organization handle it all centrally. And then, Carlo, if you can switch back to the PowerPoint side, I would appreciate it. Okay, so really what I try to impart on
clients as best practices is to try to give those who are responsible for the numbers at the end of the day the ownership and responsibility for those numbers. So if you think about it, before you distribute the responsibility for planning, forecasting, budgeting, quite often budget targets might be dictated to managers from finance. So kind of from a top-down, here's the number that you've got to hit. The manager could, probably not a finance person, may have no flexibility to respond to a changing business environment in that type of a scenario. And very likely they're going to play budget games knowing that if they don't spend their budget, they're going to lose it, and will therefore waste a lot of time managing back to a budget instead of managing their business. And if you do it properly, and granted this is more easily said than done, but do it properly, you can really instill planning responsibility throughout the entire organization. And one key enabler to that is a good, solid rewards and recognition system that ties back to the underlying KPIs that you're trying to promote based on your overarching strategy. You want to use the corporate performance management tools, process, and culture to align each of the distributed teams with a company's overall strategic objectives, and continually communicate any changes to those strategic objectives so everybody's kept aware and can adjust and react to them. And delegate authority to manage spending and responsibility for the spending down to that budget level. And you'll find that doing this, if people are empowered to do that and you have the right system and the right process in place, people will make better decisions. You're going to be able to have more efficient use of your resources, and on top of that, the finance organization won't be spending as much time coming up with the numbers. They'll be spending more time delegating targets and more time to analyze the impact of decisions and what can be done better in sharing best practices. Okay, so what we really want to do here is have direct involvement of all the managers to drive accountability for the results. An easy-to-use corporate performance management application is a good way to do that, allowing managers to participate. If you're purely Excel-based, it's definitely more challenging to have a simple interface that allows non-finance folks to get engaged and enrolled in the process. And with that, if the budget managers are empowered to develop the plans, then FP&A is going to have more time to analyze those plans. So I was working with a company who had been in the tradition of the finance organization controlling the whole entire planning forecasting process, and the gentleman who was head of planning, very intelligent, bright man, had gone to Ivy League school, did a phenomenal job in terms of pulling together his budget and plan within an ivory tower of what he could understand and know. But what we helped them do is to take the responsibility for pulling together the numbers out of his hands and push it out into the lines of business. And in doing that, the lines of business no longer were saying, okay, that's not my number, I don't recognize that number. They were suddenly the ones who were owning the number, coming up with the number, and so increased the divisions and the business units' ownership of the number. It also ultimately improved the quality of the number because they knew things about what was realistic, what wasn't realistic to include in the numbers. And then from the center, from the central FP&A organization's perspective, they could then spend the time analyzing the inputs from the different business units, different departments, and push back where needed if the numbers weren't realistic, if there was sandbagging going on. So it shifted the time of the finance organization from being the one who came up with all the numbers and going through a very laborious process, a lot of long hours in doing that, pushing it out to the managers and getting more accountability, more accuracy, and better decision making as a result. Okay, best practice number 5 is to enable a self-service and on-demand culture. So obviously, kind of linking it back to the last best practice, you're going to be in a much better position to collaborate throughout your organization if you've got a on-demand culture and tools and capability to enable those budget managers, enable those general managers of their business units to answer their own questions and not have to go through finance to get all the answers to their numbers. So really the idea here is to put the business users in the driver's seat with tools to analyze their own data. A key aspect to this is if you want to empower non-finance users, you really need to have an easy-to-use interface that requires minimal training. If you try to make it too complicated, experience has shown that you're not going to be able to relinquish that responsibility for analyzing and understanding the numbers outside of finance. So the questions are going to continue to come back to finance if it's not an easy-to-use interface that doesn't require just a ton of training. And in doing this, it will really reduce the amount of strain on your finance and IT organizations both. One of the tools that we deal with that I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute is a tool called adaptive planning. And you can see here a nice quote from Konica Minolta in terms of adaptive planning helping them house their data across all of their different platforms, whether it be headcount metrics, their sales metrics, revenues, and within adaptive planning, their managers are able to use and create their own reports via drag and drop utility and not have to go to finance anymore to get that sort of information. So it's, quite frankly, the self-service aspect of this is really difficult, if not impossible, to do without a planning application. So if you're purely using Excel today, it's going to be very, very challenging to kind of give that up and have finance freed from the strain of providing all the numbers and all the information to the consumers of the information that are out there. Okay, so we rolled through those 5 best practices, and now just talking a bit about technology, a key enabler to all these best practices, to implementing all these best practices. Really, if you don't have the right technology, if you've got the wrong technology, it will drain time, money from your organization. It's going to have your finance organization doing the wrong things, the wrong activities with their time, spending their time adding up numbers, checking for errors, and not have time to go drive better decisions. There's been a good amount of press lately about some different famous people having errors in their spreadsheets. So that's hit the news wires, everything from Reinhardt and Rogoff, who are some economists who have a famous study around sovereign debt, and they had an error in their spreadsheet, to some hedge funds that had some errors in their spreadsheet just within the last couple months. The spreadsheets, I'm sure all of you have had situations where you've had errors in your spreadsheets. You maybe distribute an Excel model, somebody inserts a new row, a new column, you try to re-aggregate those numbers, pulling them back into the center, and you don't know that that new column or row's in there, and numbers get off. Seen this time and time again. On the order of 88% of audited spreadsheets have errors in them. So Excel, while a great tool, I love Excel, one of my favorite tools to use, but it is certainly error prone. And so on the low end, it's certainly the item that most finance professionals are using. It's the most widely adopted tool out there for finance, and for some good reasons. It's very easy to use. It's intuitive, but it's slow. It's error prone. You can't easily collaborate with it. It really doesn't scale very well, and you don't have security privileges built into it. So back, over a decade ago now at this point, there were some purpose-built applications developed by the likes, of what we know today anyway now as acquisitions have occurred, as Oracle, Hyperion, SAP, Business Objects, and IBM Cognos. These are very good applications, very robust, a lot of powerful features, but they tend to be very expensive. They are very complex, and it takes a long time to deploy them. They can be hard to use and require a lot of IT resources to keep them up and running. So while powerful, the adoption has been a bit limited through to mainly the largest enterprises out there that can afford the cost and complexity of these sorts of tools. And so really what I've seen while I've worked with the legacy enterprise applications, we've done implementations with those, and do believe in the power of them. I've realized over time that in working with a lot of different tools that there are better options out there. And so over the last 5 years, really the cloud has taken off as a delivery mechanism for corporate performance management, budgeting, planning, and forecasting, and FP&A applications. And the reason for that, there are different reasons. They're very easy to use compared to the legacy enterprise applications. They have more and more powerful features every day. So while probably the legacy applications have a bit of a leg up in terms of the features and functionality to the cloud solutions, every day that goes on, the cloud providers are releasing more and more features and functionality. They're very quick to deploy. So I'll give you an example of I have implemented Oracle Hyperion, and it has in some cases taken 6 or 8 weeks to literally install the software on the servers at the client site. So it can be very complicated just to literally, think of it as almost like loading the floppy disks onto the server before you even do any configuration of the model. Compare that to cloud-based solutions, very quick to deploy. You can call one of the vendors up, turn on the switch immediately. It's ready to go. You don't have to deal with the hardware. You don't have to spend a lot of time having your IT organization dedicate their time and resources to getting it up and running. It can be more collaborative potentially because it's accessed through the web, so you can get a very distributed team engaged and enrolled in the application quickly and easily. They're extremely scalable, so if you need to add more users over time, more data over time, you get a larger share of the cloud resources that are out there versus if you've got a legacy enterprise system, you may have to go install additional servers, which takes time and effort, obviously. And then the cloud solutions, because they're typically delivered via a software as a service subscription model, they know that they've got to keep their customers pleased in order to keep them as subscribers because they can quit subscribing at any time. And with that comes a culture of continuous innovation in terms of releasing new features and functionality almost continually. So you'll see here some of the cloud-based corporate performance management or enterprise performance management applications, adaptive planning, host analytics, Anaplan. They are certainly some of the leaders within that space. And interestingly, Gartner had done a study last year where they asked existing users of corporate performance management applications what they thought about the support and the implementation related to that particular CPM application. And what you'll see is adaptive planning scored upper right corner, so a cloud-based solution scoring in the upper right corner there in terms of support and implementation scores. And I know a lot of other third-party research above and beyond. Gartner has had a similar result. We work closely with adaptive planning in part due to these customer satisfaction scores. That's a thing that's important to our consulting organization, that the clients and customers of the software are satisfied with the application in the end. And so you'll see kind of across the board third-party research that will suggest that adaptive planning scores extremely highly. And typically, the others, as you'll see here, host analytics, another cloud-based solution, scoring quite a bit higher than some of the traditional legacy vendors like Oracle down here, towards the bottom of SAP as well down here. So not as high, even though those applications are very powerful, typically not as high customer satisfaction, client satisfaction related to those tools. One aspect that leads to those sorts of results is the total cost of ownership that the SaaS cloud-based solutions have a much lower cost of ownership when you consider all the various costs from training to the implementation services costs, the cost of the software itself, and then IT infrastructure. So if you're purely looking at the software cost itself, which is represented by kind of a light blue shading here, you might not see that there's that large of a difference between the on-premise versus the cloud-based application. But when you look at the total picture of the servers that you don't have to purchase for a SaaS solution, the fact that you're going to have a quicker implementation, and the consulting resources such as me are usually cheaper for SaaS-based tools than for the legacy tools. So lower total cost of ownership. And this is even more extreme. This benchmarking to the on-premise application is really benchmarked against some mid-tier on-premise applications. The difference between the two would even be more extreme if we were benchmarking back against SAP, Oracle, or Cognos. So lower cost tends to lead to part of the reason for the higher customer satisfaction in the end, but then there are other reasons for that as well. So adaptive planning, definitely as you're considering embarking on a journey to implement some of these best practices, a tool like adaptive planning can be key in terms of enabling a lot of those best practices. They are a 3-product company. They offer a planning application called Adaptive Planning, which was the initial product that they've been offering for a number of years now, and it's a great tool for financial planning and analysis, generating annual plans, budgets, forecasts, rolling forecasts, and the like. They also offer adaptive consolidation, which can help you with your eliminations, translation adjustment, foreign exchange, minority interest calculations, and the like. And then finally as well, we touched on the fact that being able to visualize and see the data for your actuals trends and understand if those trends are realistically reflected in your projections and your forecast via a visualization application can be very powerful. And so adaptive intelligence is an example of a tool that enables you to do the drill down, the drill across, leveraging the multi-dimensional nature of the planning detail that you likely will have built if you've got a driver-based plan in place. So being able to visualize all that's very powerful and can do that via a tool like adaptive intelligence. So really, as you think about implementing the best practices, part of it's going to be process, part of it's people, but technology is a key enabler to ensuring that the tools that you put in place are going to help you achieve those best practices. So definitely encourage you to think about putting a cloud-based CPM application at the hub of your overall corporate performance management, financial planning, and analysis process to enable you to spend more time analyzing the numbers. So just to recap, we walked through these best practices, 5 best practices. Number 1 was move to rolling forecasts to help you be more on top of the numbers, making better decisions in as real time as you're able to do to go drive the business to higher and higher growth, hitting your key performance indicators. In order to be able to do that seamlessly, you want to think about automating the pulling in of the actuals data for those KPIs into your planning tool, into your dashboard tool, to have real-time feedback and free your finance organization up to do the more value-added activity of analyzing the numbers as opposed to spending the manual effort to collect them. Best practice number 3, create driver-based plans so you can focus on a few inputs into the model that really make a difference in terms of a cause relationship effect to drive the output, and toggle those the planning process to get their point of view, their knowledge embedded into the decisions, and also to get their buy-in into the numbers at the end of the day so they have responsibility for delivering them. And that will help you make better decisions in the end, with finance being the glue that can help ensure that that collaboration is analytically sound. And then finally, enable self-serve consumption of the information to help those business end users be engaged in the process without taxing the finance organization. And again, just to reiterate here, it's very, very difficult to achieve the self-service vision if you don't have some sort of corporate performance management application in place and are relying, exclusively on your transactional system like an ERP system and Excel. Okay, so I would like to thank everybody for your time and attention today. I know Carlo's going to open it up for questions here in a moment and also has a final polling question that he wants to turn to.
Thank you, Bill, for sharing those great insights and best practices with our audience here. So we do have a few questions, and I just want to give everyone the opportunity who has been listening in to Bill's presentation here to leverage the questions box within your GoToWebinar panel to ask any question of Bill. We do have a few minutes, and so I'll go ahead and kick off this Q&A with one question from the audience. And it's more of a broader statement. So identifying the 5 best practices is very interesting and very useful. But can you share some stories from either your past life within the FP&A role at a large organization, or areas of where you have implemented that some things have gone awry? So some folks have taken the 5 best practices and tried to implement it, and unfortunately missed a step or two. Can you give some examples or share some of the war stories around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that comes most readily to mind to answer that question is I'll find that some clients don't have well-defined what I'd call metadata or master data up front, and they try to embark on the journey of implementing these best practices before they've defined some of that metadata. And what I mean by metadata are things like, what is the definition of your customer? Who are your customers? What are your products? What are your services? That sort of overarching structural construct. And when you don't have a clear picture of who your customer is and a definition of that can be shared in common across the enterprise, it leads to a lot of potential confusion in the planning process. It leads to the potential for errors in the planning process in terms of the modeling even, that somebody downstream, let's say in the cost of sales environment, they may miscost their cost of goods account because they don't think about the product definition in the same way that maybe somebody who's responsible for sales is thinking about it. So having that common metadata throughout the organization is really key, and having that in place up front before you begin the process of embarking on implementing rolling forecasts, automating KPIs, and having driver-based plans. And it really provides a framework or a shell for collaboration so that you can be sure that you're talking about the same things in the same ways across the organization. So it really is the backbone, the language for the overall planning process. And then somewhat related to that, but different, is trying to plan too much detail. I've seen be a common downfall throughout organizations, that just because maybe the technology is capable of enabling you to have a lot of detail doesn't mean that you necessarily should have it. And so I've seen different clients that go out and they want to load into the planning system, 10,000 SKUs, let's say, stock keeping units that they're wanting to plan revenue for. And if not done properly, again, kind of linking back to the metadata hierarchies, if not done properly, then you can end up focusing on the wrong areas and just not even be able to have a good plan in place, that you're just going to require too much detail to be input into the interface, into the assumptions, into the drivers, and therefore, at the end of the day, not having time to analyze it again. So even though you've got this planning application, gosh, I as a business unit manager, I've got to go input forecasts for 10,000 items. Once I've done that, that takes so much time that I don't have any time on the end to analyze it personally, and the finance organization ends up maybe not having any time because they're busy quality controlling all the input. So taking it up a level and saying, okay, let me really focus on, if it's a driver, the really key drivers overall. Don't try to boil the ocean. If you're thinking about metadata, let's just plan our key customers or our key products and have different groupings of products rather than trying to go down to the lowest level of activity.
Thanks for that, Bill. And just with the interest of time, and I apologize to the audience for this, I'm only going to be able to share just one more question with you, Bill, but hopefully you'll work with us to answer the remaining open ones at the end of this webinar. So this one's coming from another audience member, and they're actually looking to implement a SaaS-based solution for their CPM process, and they're looking kind of just a quick recommendation or best practice on seeking the buy-in from their organization, kind of the whole organization. So any recommendations on best ways to communicate the value add?
Yeah, I think one of the really nice things about the cloud-based solutions, and I'll use adaptive planning here as an example, is because you don't have to get the solution installed on your own hardware, your own servers, you can actually go out there and start a free trial of the software. And what I've seen work very nicely is go try to build a mini proof of concept out there. It's free to do. You can go out to Adaptive Planning's website, download a free trial, and go build a subset of that if you need help doing that. There are consultants like me that can help you get that up and running real quickly. And it builds a small piece of what you're trying to do overall during that free trial period, and take that to the organization and say, hey, look at what we built. We were able to do this, in 2 weeks' time. If we could move our entire planning process onto this platform, it wouldn't take very much time and effort, and you can use that free trial period to shop it around and showcase a proof of concept. So I've seen that be very powerful, and it's something that is really enabled via the SaaS cloud solutions that you really can't do with the legacy on-premise versions, or certainly not very easily.
Thanks for that, Bill. And with that, we will close up our Q&A session here. And like I said, we will work with the audience members who we did not get a chance to answer your questions, and work with Bill to get those answered for you. So just a few last-minute housekeeping items before we do end today. At the end of the webinar, you will be prompted to participate in the short survey. We truly value your feedback and appreciate your time to help us continue to deliver this great content to you. And at that time, you will also have the ability to easily request an introduction and connection with Bill with the click of your mouse. And we also ask you to join us on Proformative.com to continue this great discussion around the best practices on FP&A. And if you have any questions around the CPE credits, please contact Chris Brower at Proformative.com. And just a quick brief statement around, we do have our CFO Dimensions Conference coming up at the end of August in New York City. This is going to be a great event to listen to some world-class leaders sharing best practices around strategic leadership and finance, and essentially the evolution of the role of finance. It's a great opportunity to meet, network, and learn. So we ask you to check it out at CFOdimensions.com, and you can also, in your short survey, have the opportunity to ask for more information around that. And so with that said, just to get everyone back to their jobs, I will launch the fourth and final polling question for today. I'd like to take this time to thank Bill for allowing us to take up some of his time and having him share his great insight and subject matter expertise. And I'd also like to thank the audience for your time. Again, at the end, we will be closing down this polling question, and you'll be prompted to take the short survey. We appreciate your feedback, and we look forward to seeing you again at another Proformative event online or at Proformative.com. Have a great rest of the day, folks. Thank you so much.